Sienna Clark sat in the witness box of the federal courthouse in downtown Manhattan, her hands folded carefully in her lap to keep them from shaking, and tried to ignore the weight of Viktor Volkov's stare burning into her from across the courtroom. The Russian crime lord sat at the defense table looking almost bored, despite facing multiple charges of racketeering, money laundering, human trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder, and operating a continuing criminal enterprise. His expensive suit was perfectly tailored. His silver hair was impeccably styled, and his expression suggested a man who had never worried about consequences because he had always been powerful enough to avoid them. But today was different. Today, Viktor Volkov was facing consequences, and Sienna Clark was the reason why. He smiled at her as she settled into the witness chair. Not a friendly smile, not even an angry smile. It was a promise, a threat wrapped in civilized veneer. A guarantee of what would happen to her if she said what she had come here to say. Sienna had seen that smile before, in photographs of some of Volkov's victims. People who had testified against him. People who had cooperated with law enforcement. People who were now dead. But Sienna had not spent the last 6 months of her life analyzing financial records, connecting shell corporations to criminal enterprises, following money trails through dozens of countries, and building an absolutely airtight case against one of the most dangerous men on the East Coast just to back down now. At 29 years old, she had already made a name for herself as one of the best forensic accountants in the federal prosecutor's office. She had a gift for finding patterns where others saw only chaos. She could follow money through the most complex web of transactions and emerge with a clear picture of exactly who was paying whom and why. She had helped convict corrupt politicians, white-collar criminals, and organized crime figures. She had testified in federal court 17 times before today. But Viktor Volkov was different. Volkov was the biggest case of her career. The case that would either cement her reputation as one of the premier forensic accountants in the country or end her life in a way that would serve as a warning to anyone else who might consider cooperating with federal authorities against organized crime. Miss Clark? The federal prosecutor, a sharp woman in her 40s named Catherine Reeves, began with a voice that was both professional and gently encouraging. Can you please explain to the jury what you discovered during your analysis of the defendant's financial records? Sienna took a slow breath, met the eyes of the jury members one by one to establish connection and credibility, and began to speak. Her voice was steady, clear, and confident, despite the fear that was making her heart race and her palms sweat beneath the table. Over the course of 6 months, I analyzed approximately 2 million financial transactions connected to Viktor Volkov and his various business interests. What I discovered was a sophisticated money laundering operation that moved approximately $300 million per year from illegal sources into legitimate businesses. For the next 3 hours and 45 minutes, Sienna walked the jury through the most complex financial investigation of her career. She explained how Volkov had created a network of over 60 shell corporations registered in different states and countries. She showed how these corporations had been used to purchase legitimate businesses, including restaurant chains, construction, companies, real estate holdings, and import-export operations. She detailed how money from human trafficking networks in Eastern Europe had been funneled through these businesses, cleaned of its criminal origins, and then reinvested into both legal and illegal enterprises. She used charts that she had personally created, showing the flow of money from source to destination. She walked through spreadsheets that documented thousands of transactions. She explained complex financial concepts in language that the jury could understand. She answered every question the prosecutor asked with precision and clarity. And she never once looked away from the evidence, never once showed uncertainty, never once gave Viktor Volkov the satisfaction of seeing her intimidated. The defense attorney, an expensive lawyer named Richard Blackwell, who specialized in representing organized crime figures, tried to shake her testimony during cross-examination. He questioned her methodology. He suggested that correlation did not equal causation. He implied that she was making assumptions based on incomplete information. He attempted to portray her as an inexperienced government employee who was in over her head. But Sienna had anticipated every single one of these attacks. She had prepared for months. She had reviewed every document multiple times. She had verified every transaction. She had consulted with experts in international finance, money laundering, and organized crime. She knew her case was solid, and she defended it with the confidence of someone who knew she was absolutely, unquestionably right. "Mr. Blackwell," Sienna said at one point, her voice calm but firm, "you're suggesting that it's merely coincidence that $300 million flowed through these 62 shell corporations, all of which were registered by the same law firm, all of which listed the same business address that turned out to be an empty office, and all of which made payments to businesses that are documented fronts for Mr. Volkov's criminal organization. That's not coincidence. That's evidence of a deliberate, sophisticated money laundering scheme. And I have documented every single transaction that proves it." When Sienna finally stepped down from the witness stand after nearly 4 hours of testimony, her legs were shaking, her mouth was dry, and she was mentally exhausted. But she had done exactly what she came to do. She had presented evidence that was irrefutable. She had explained complex financial crimes in a way that the jury could understand and believe. She had given the prosecution everything they needed to put Viktor Volkov away for the rest of his life. As she walked toward the courtroom exit where her FBI escort was waiting to take her to a secure location, Sienna allowed herself a moment of cautious relief. She had survived the testimony. She had told the truth under oath. She had done her job with excellence. Now she just had to survive the aftermath. It was in that moment, as she moved through the courtroom gallery, that Sienna noticed something unusual. In the very back row of the public seating area, separated from the other observers by several, conspicuously empty seats on either side, sat a man who seemed to command the space around him without making any obvious effort to do so. He was probably in his early 40s, with dark hair that was styled with the kind of casual precision that suggested both money and attention to detail. His olive skin spoke of Mediterranean heritage, Italian most likely. He wore a charcoal, gray suit that was so perfectly tailored it had clearly been custom-made for his body. Everything about him, from his posture to his expression, to the way he held himself, suggested power, control, and the absolute confidence of someone who had never needed to prove himself to anyone. But what really caught Sienna's attention was not his appearance, striking as it was. It was the way everyone else in the courtroom seemed to instinctively create space around him. The way even the court officers seemed to be aware of his presence without looking directly at him. The way the very air seemed to shift when he moved. And most importantly, it was the way he was looking at her. Not with Viktor Volkov's threatening intensity. Not with the admiration that some men showed when they saw an attractive woman. This was something different. Assessment, calculation, decision. He was looking at her the way a chess master looks at the board, seeing not just the current position, but all the possible moves and outcomes that would follow. Their eyes met for exactly 3 seconds. In that brief moment, Sienna felt like she was being evaluated against criteria she couldn't begin to understand. She saw intelligence in those dark eyes. She saw power. She saw danger. But she also saw something else. Something that looked almost like approval. Then he nodded. Just once. A gesture so subtle and so brief that if Sienna hadn't been looking directly at him in that exact moment, she would have missed it entirely. It wasn't a greeting. It wasn't a threat. It was an acknowledgement. A recognition of something that had just shifted in the complex power dynamics of New York's criminal underworld. And then, before Sienna could process what had just happened or what that nod might mean, the man stood with fluid grace and left the courtroom. He moved with the kind of smooth efficiency that suggested he had done this many times before, slipping out through the back exit with perfect timing, disappearing before anyone who wasn't specifically watching him would even notice he had been there. "Miss Clark?" Agent Jennifer Martinez, her FBI escort, touched her elbow gently but firmly. "We need to go. Right now. The verdict could come back any time, and we want you secured before that happens." Sienna allowed herself to be guided out of the courthouse, through a side entrance that had been cleared of observers, and into an unmarked FBI vehicle. But as they drove through the Manhattan streets toward the first of what would be many safe houses, Sienna couldn't stop thinking about the man in the back of the courtroom, about the way he had looked at her, about that single significant nod. She had no idea that she had just caught the attention of Marco Vitale, head of one of the most powerful Italian organized crime families in New York. She had no idea that her testimony had just accomplished something that Marco had been trying to achieve for 3 years. And she had no idea that her life was about to change in ways that had nothing to do with witness protection or federal security protocols. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of safe houses, debriefings, threat assessments, and increasingly urgent planning sessions with the FBI's witness protection program. The jury had deliberated for less than 8 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all 23 counts against Viktor Volkov. The judge had immediately remanded him to federal custody pending sentencing, which would almost certainly result in multiple consecutive life sentences. Viktor Volkov would spend the rest of his life in a maximum security federal prison. His criminal empire would eventually crumble without his leadership. His associates would scramble to fill the power vacuum he left behind. Justice had been served. But justice came with a price, and Sienna Clarke was going to pay it. "You need to understand the situation," Agent Martinez explained as they sat in a nondescript conference room in an undisclosed FBI facility somewhere in New Jersey. Viktor Volkov has extensive connections throughout the criminal underworld, both in the United States and internationally. His organization isn't going to simply disappear because he's in prison. His lieutenants will continue operating his various enterprises, and they will want revenge against the person who was most responsible for putting him there. "Me," Sienna said flatly, though it wasn't really a question. "You," Martinez confirmed with visible regret in her eyes. "Your testimony was devastating to their defense. The financial evidence you presented was the foundation of the prosecution's entire case. Without you, they might have been able to create reasonable doubt. With you, the verdict was essentially guaranteed. Which means Volkov's organization views you as the primary reason their boss is going to die in federal prison, and they will want to send a message about what happens to people who cooperate with law enforcement against them." Sienna felt cold despite the overheated conference room. She had known there would be consequences to testifying. She had accepted that her life would change, that she would face danger, that she might need protection for a while. But somehow, hearing it stated so baldly by an FBI agent with access to intelligence reports and threat assessments made it more real, more immediate, more terrifying. "What are my options?" Sienna asked, even though she already suspected she knew the answer. Martinez pushed a folder across the table. Inside were forms, documents, and information packets about the Federal Witness Protection Program. "We're recommending immediate enrollment in WITSEC, full identity change, relocation to a different part of the country, complete severance of all previous connections and relationships. It's the only way to keep you safe given the level of threat we've assessed." Sienna opened the folder with hands that were not quite steady. She had seen these kinds of documents before, had worked with witnesses who had entered the program, had understood theoretically what it meant, but seeing it applied to her own life was different. These weren't theoretical documents. These were the forms that would erase Sienna Clarke from existence and create someone entirely new. "How long?" she asked quietly. "How long would I have to stay in the program?" Martinez hesitated, and that hesitation told Sienna everything she needed to know before the agent even spoke. "Indefinitely. Possibly forever. Given the nature of Volkov's organization, their reach, their resources, and their demonstrated willingness to pursue revenge against people who testify against them, we can't project a time when you would be safe to resume your previous identity." "I'm sorry, Sienna. I know that's not what you wanted to hear." It wasn't. Sienna sat staring at the documents that would allow her to disappear into a new life. A life where she wouldn't be a forensic accountant anymore because that skill set was too distinctive, too easy to trace. A life where she would never see her younger brother Marcus again, couldn't attend his medical school graduation next spring, couldn't be part of his life as he became the doctor he had always dreamed of being. A life where she would work some anonymous job in some anonymous town, always looking over her shoulder, always wondering if today was the day Volkov's people finally found her. "What about my brother?" Sienna asked. "Marcus is all the family I have left. I raised him after our parents died. He's in his final year of medical school. I can't just disappear from his life without explanation. We would inform him that you've entered witness protection for your safety," Martinez explained gently. "He would understand that he can never try to contact you, never try to find you. We'd make sure he has counseling and support. But Sienna, you have to understand. Any contact with him, any connection to your previous life, creates a vulnerability that Volkov's people could exploit. The program only works if you truly become someone new. Sienna looked at the woman sitting across from her, saw the genuine sympathy in her eyes, and understood that Agent Martinez was trying to help, that the FBI was doing everything it could within the constraints of its resources and protocols. But Sienna also understood something else. The witness protection program wasn't offering her safety. It was offering her a different kind of death, not physical death, but the death of everything that made her who she was. Her identity, her career, her relationships, her entire life. Everything that mattered to her would be erased, so that her body could continue to exist in hiding. I need time to think about it, Sienna said finally. Martinez's expression showed concern. You don't have much time. The longer you wait, the more vulnerable you are. Volkov's people are already looking for you. Every day you delay entering the program is another day they could find you. I'm sorry to pressure you, but you need to make this decision soon. Preferably today. I understand, Sienna said. But this is my life you're asking me to give up. I need at least one night to process what this means. Martinez didn't look happy about it, but she nodded. One night. But Sienna, please think seriously about this. I've seen what happens to witnesses who refuse protection. I've seen what Volkov's organization does to people they want to punish. It's not quick and it's not merciful. Please don't take that risk. That night, in the sterile safety of the FBI safe house in New Jersey, Sienna lay awake in the small bedroom they had assigned her, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything she would lose. She thought about Marcus, about how he had looked at her with such pride when she had gotten her job with the federal prosecutor's office. She thought about the career she had built, about the satisfaction of using her analytical skills to hold powerful criminals accountable. She thought about her friends, her apartment in Brooklyn, her whole life that she had worked so hard to create after their parents had died in a car accident when she was 21 and Marcus was only 14. She had raised him, worked 2 jobs to pay for his private school tuition, made sure he had everything he needed to pursue his dream of becoming a doctor, sacrificed her own social life, her own opportunities, her own desires to ensure that her baby brother had the future their parents would have wanted for him. And now the FBI was telling her that she would have to disappear from his life forever, that she would never see him graduate medical school, never see him become a doctor, never be part of his life again. The unfairness of it was crushing. Sienna had done the right thing. She had testified against a monster. She had used her skills to help put away someone who had caused immeasurable suffering, and her reward was to lose everything. Honor matters. You help me whether you intended to or not, and I do not leave debts unpaid. Second, I get to send a message to everyone in the criminal world that people who do the right thing, who testify against truly evil operators like Volkov, can be protected and even rewarded. That's good for business and good for reducing the kind of excessive brutality that brings too much law enforcement attention. And third, I get the satisfaction of preventing Volkov's people from achieving their revenge, which further undermines what remains of his organization. He paused, then added quietly, but most importantly, I get to prevent a brave, intelligent woman who did the right thing from being punished for her courage. That matters to me, Miss Clark. Perhaps it shouldn't, given my profession, but it does. Sienna studied his face through the narrow opening of the door. She was looking for signs of deception, manipulation, ulterior motives. What she saw instead was something that looked like genuine conviction. This man, this criminal, this mafia boss, seemed to actually mean what he was saying. What would your protection look like? She asked carefully. You would continue your life, Marco said simply. You would keep your identity as Sienna Clark. You would maintain contact with your brother Marcus. You would continue working in your field, though not for the federal prosecutor's office for obvious reasons. I would arrange a position for you with a private financial consulting firm that handles legitimate business, but works with clients who value discretion. Your skills would be well utilized, your salary would be significantly better than what the government paid you, and you would work in an office that I own, which means security would be guaranteed. And where would I live? I would provide you with a secure residence in Manhattan, Marco replied. Fully protected. My people would monitor all access points. You would have household staff to handle daily needs. You would be able to go about your life normally, with discreet but constant protection. The key difference from the FBI's approach is that you would not be hiding. You would be visibly under my protection, and everyone in the criminal world would understand that harming you means going to war with the Vitale family. Very few people are willing to take that risk. And what do you get from me in return? Sienna asked, because there had to be a catch. There was always a catch. Nothing, Marco said, and the surprise must have shown on her face because he smiled slightly. I am not asking you to work for my organization. I am not asking you to compromise your ethics or become involved in any illegal activities. I am not even asking for your gratitude, though I would hope over time I might earn your respect. I am simply offering protection to someone who deserves it. If you accept, you live your life according to your own values and choices. The only requirement is that you accept the security arrangements I put in place. This sounds too good to be true, Sienna said, which means it probably is. It sounds too good to be true because you have been taught to think that people in my profession are all monsters like Victor Volkov, Marco replied. But Miss Clark, I am not Volkov. I have rules. I have honor. I do not traffic human beings. I do not target innocents. I do not operate through fear and brutality. I provide services to communities that need them. I maintain order through influence and negotiation rather than violence. And I follow a code that has been passed down through 4 generations of my family. We are not the same. He straightened slightly, preparing to leave. You have until dawn to make your decision. That gives you approximately 4 hours. If you choose to accept my protection, leave this safe house at 6 a.m. exactly and walk 2 blocks north. A black Mercedes will be waiting at the intersection. If you do not appear, I will respect your decision and we will not meet again. But Miss Clark, I strongly encourage you to think carefully about which choice actually offers you a future worth living. And if I tell the FBI about this conversation, Sienna asked. Then you tell them, Marco said with a slight shrug. They will not believe you. They will think it was a dream or stress-induced hallucination, and they will move you to a new safe house immediately, which will accomplish nothing except delay the inevitable. But you will not tell them, because you are intelligent enough to understand that I have just offered you something they cannot, a way to keep everything that matters to you instead of losing it all. He moved to leave, then paused and looked back at her one more time. You are brave, Miss Clark. You proved that in the courtroom today. Now prove that you are also wise. Choose the protection that actually protects. Choose the life that is actually worth living. Choose yourself, your brother, your future. Dawn comes quickly, and then he was gone, disappearing down the hallway with the same smooth efficiency he had displayed in the courtroom, leaving Sienna standing at her door with the chain still engaged and her mind racing with impossible choices. She spent the next 3 hours pacing her small bedroom, thinking through every angle, every risk, every possible outcome of the decision she had to make. On one side was the FBI's offer: complete erasure of her identity, relocation to an anonymous town, abandonment of her career and family, but theoretical safety through invisibility. On the other side was Marco Vitale's offer: continuation of her real life, protection through power rather than hiding, but trusting a criminal with her safety. Every logical part of her brain said to choose the FBI, to trust the legitimate authorities, to follow the established protocols for witness protection. It was the safe choice, the reasonable choice, the choice that society would expect her to make. But another part of her, the part that had spent 8 years raising her younger brother alone, the part that had built a career on seeing patterns and connections that others missed, the part that had walked into that courtroom to face Victor Volkov, despite knowing the risks, that part was asking different questions. Which choice actually gave her a life worth living? Which choice let her keep being Sienna Clark? Which choice allowed her to see Marcus graduate medical school, to continue using her skills for meaningful work, to be herself instead of some manufactured identity? At 5:30 in the morning, Sienna made her decision. She left a note for Agent Martinez. It was brief, honest, and apologetic. Agent Martinez, thank you for everything you've tried to do to keep me safe. But I can't become someone else. I can't abandon my brother or my career or everything that makes me who I am. I'm choosing a different path. I know you'll think this is a mistake, but I believe it's the right choice for me. Please tell Marcus that I love him and I'll contact him soon. Sienna Clark. At 5:55 in the morning, Sienna walked out of the FBI safe house carrying nothing but her phone and the business card Marco had slipped under her door before he left. The early morning air was cold and crisp, and Manhattan was just beginning to wake up. She walked 2 blocks north, exactly as Marco had instructed. The black Mercedes was waiting at the intersection at precisely 6 o'clock. The driver was a professional-looking man in his 30s who opened the rear door for her without comment or judgment. Inside the vehicle, Marco Vitale sat reading a copy of the Financial Times, like this was the most normal thing in the world. "You came," he said, looking up with an expression that might have been approval mixed with relief. "I'm probably making a huge mistake," Sienna replied as she got into the car. "Perhaps," Marco agreed with complete honesty. "Or perhaps you are making the first truly intelligent decision of this entire situation. Time will tell." He signaled the driver, and the car pulled smoothly into the light early morning traffic. "But I promise you this, Sienna Clark. From this moment forward, you are under my protection. That is not a metaphor. That is not a figure of speech. That is an absolute commitment. No one will harm you while I live. You have my word on that. And in my world, when a Vitale gives his word, it is iron. Why do I believe you?" Sienna asked quietly. "Because despite everything you have been taught to think about men like me, you recognize honor when you see it," Marco replied. "And because you are intelligent enough to understand that I gain nothing by lying to you about this. Protecting you serves my interests. Failing to protect you would harm my reputation and my position. The logic is simple even if the situation is complicated." The car took them into Manhattan as the sun was beginning to rise over the city skyline. They drove through streets that were becoming increasingly busy with early morning commuters. Eventually, they arrived at a building that Sienna recognized as one of the most exclusive residential addresses in Manhattan. The kind of building where apartments cost millions of dollars, and the resident list read like a who's who of New York's elite. The lobby was elegant and secure, with professional staff who greeted Marco with respect but without obvious deference. They took a private elevator to the top floor, and when the doors opened, Sienna stepped directly into a penthouse apartment that was more luxurious than any space she had ever been in. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park and the Manhattan skyline. The morning sunlight streamed in, illuminating an interior that was a perfect blend of modern comfort and classical Italian elegance. The furniture was clearly expensive, but also comfortable and lived in, rather than being purely for show. Original artwork hung on the walls, pieces that Sienna recognized from her art history classes as being worth small fortunes. Everything about the space spoke of wealth, taste, and a life very different from anything Sienna had ever known. "This is your home for now," Marco said, gesturing around the apartment. The entire floor, 3 bedrooms, office space, full kitchen, private terrace, fully secured. My people monitor all entry points. The building's security staff answered to me. "You are safe here, Sienna. As safe as it is possible to be." "This is too much," Sienna protested, feeling overwhelmed by the luxury surrounding her. "This is adequate," Marco corrected gently but firmly. "You are under my protection, which means you reflect on me and my family. I do not protect people inadequately. I do not house people in substandard accommodations. You will live here in safety and comfort, and you will accept that this is part of what my protection means." He walked to the kitchen and started making coffee with practiced ease. "There is food in the refrigerator and pantry. Fresh coffee, which I am preparing now. Everything you need should be here, but if you find you require anything, there is a phone by the door with a direct line to my household coordinator. Her name is Isabella, and she will handle anything you need. You will meet her properly this afternoon." "I have a job," Sienna said, still trying to process the fact that this was now apparently her life. "I need to work. I can't just sit here in luxury and do nothing." "And you will work," Marco assured her as he poured coffee into 2 cups. "But not for the federal prosecutor's office for obvious reasons. Instead, I have arranged a position for you with Sterling Financial Consulting. They are a legitimate firm that handles financial analysis for high-net-worth individuals and corporations. The work is interesting, the clients value discretion, and your forensic accounting skills will be extremely well utilized. Your salary will be 3 times what the government was paying you, and you will work in an office that I own, in a building with security that I control, which means your safety is guaranteed." He handed her one of the coffee cups. It was perfect, exactly the way she liked it with just a touch of cream. She hadn't told him how she took her coffee, which meant he had researched her thoroughly. "You arranged all this?" Sienna asked. "When?" "I began making arrangements yesterday afternoon," Marco replied, while the jury was deliberating. I had contingency plans ready for multiple possible outcomes. If Volkov had been acquitted, the plans would have been different. But I was quite confident that your testimony had secured a conviction, so I prepared accordingly. You were that certain I would testify effectively? I was certain that you are the kind of person who does what is right, regardless of personal cost, Marco said. Your personnel file, your history, your entire career pattern suggested someone with extraordinary courage and commitment to justice, and I was prepared to ensure that your courage was rewarded rather than punished. Sienna took a sip of the coffee and felt some of her exhaustion begin to recede. I need to call my brother. Marcus is probably freaking out. The FBI will have told him I left their protection. You can call him, Marco agreed, but not from this apartment. We will arrange a secure phone for you, untraceable, that you can use for contact with him and any other people from your previous life. For the first few weeks, it would be better if Marcus did not know your exact location, not because I do not trust him, but because the fewer people who know where you are, the smaller the chance that information could be inadvertently compromised. It made sense, even though Sienna hated the necessity of it. When can I talk to him? This afternoon, Marco promised. After you have rested. After Isabella has made sure you have everything you need. After you have had time to process what you have chosen. Marcus will understand if he has to wait a few hours for contact, and it will give him time to move past the initial panic and be ready to actually listen when you explain your decision. Over the next few hours, Sienna began to settle into her new reality. Isabella turned out to be a warm Italian woman in her 50s who had been with Marco's family for decades. She managed the household with quiet efficiency, made incredible food despite Sienna insisting she wasn't hungry, and treated Sienna with a combination of respectful formality and maternal concern that was oddly comforting. Mr. Vitale told me you have had a difficult few days, Isabella said, as she prepared lunch that afternoon. He said you were very brave, that you did something important that put you in danger. He also said you chose to trust him for your protection. That is wise. Mr. Vitale takes his responsibilities very seriously. If he has promised to protect you, then you are protected. Nothing will harm you here. You've known him a long time, Sienna asked. Since he was 7 years old, Isabella replied with obvious affection. I worked for his father first, God rest his soul. When Mr. Vitale took over the family business after his father died, he asked me to stay on, to help him, as I had helped his father. He was so young then, only 23, suddenly responsible for everything. But he grew into the role, became a good man, strong but not cruel, powerful but not arrogant. He has honor, Signorina Clark. Real honor, not many men do anymore. That afternoon, as promised, Marco provided Sienna with a secure phone. She called Marcus immediately, and he answered on the first ring. Sienna? Oh, thank God. What the hell is going on? The FBI called me and said you left their protection. They said you're in danger. They said they don't know where you are. I've been losing my mind trying to... Marcus, breathe, Sienna interrupted gently. I'm okay. I'm safe. I promise. How can you be safe if you're not in witness protection? Marcus demanded. Sienna, you testified against one of the most dangerous criminals in the country. His people want revenge. You need federal protection. I have protection, Sienna said. Different protection. Better protection. Protection that lets me keep being myself instead of disappearing forever. What are you talking about? What protection? Sienna took a breath, knowing this was going to be difficult. I'm being protected by someone with actual power in the criminal world. Someone who can make me untouchable in a way the FBI never could. Someone whose protection is absolute because his reputation depends on keeping his word. She heard silence on the other end of the line. Then Marcus's voice, very quiet and very shocked. The Mafia. Oh God, Sienna. You're being protected by the Mafia. I'm being protected by someone who has the actual capability to keep me safe, Sienna corrected. The FBI was going to erase me, Marcus. Give me a new name. Move me to Nebraska. Tell me I could never see you again. Never watch you graduate medical school. Never be part of your life. I couldn't accept that. This way, I get to keep being your sister. I get to keep being me. But Sienna, they're criminals. Victor Volkov was a criminal, Sienna replied. He trafficked human beings. He murdered innocent people. He operated through fear and brutality. The person protecting me now is nothing like that. He has rules. He has honor. He protects people rather than preying on them. And he's given me back my life instead of taking it away. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Are you sure about this? Are you absolutely sure?" "I'm sure," Sienna said. "I know it sounds crazy. But Marcus, I've spent the last 24 hours with these people. I've seen how they operate. I've talked with the man providing my protection. He's intelligent, honorable, and absolutely committed to keeping me safe. I trust him more than I trust the FBI's ability to hide me in some small town and hope Volkov's people never find me." "You trust him," Marcus repeated slowly. "A mafia boss. I trust him," Sienna confirmed. "I know you're worried. I know this isn't what you would have chosen for me. But Marcus, I need you to understand. I'm safer now than I ever would have been in witness protection. And more importantly, I'm still me. I still have my life. I can still be your sister. That matters more to me than anything else." She heard Marcus sigh, a sound of reluctant acceptance. "I just want you to be safe, Sienna, after everything you've done for me. After raising me when Mom and Dad died. After sacrificing so much to make sure I could become a doctor. I can't lose you. I can't." "You won't," Sienna promised. "I'm protected, Marcus. Really, truly protected. And I'll be at your graduation next spring. I'll be there to see you become Dr. Marcus Clark. That's a promise." They talked for another hour, with Marcus asking questions about her living situation, her safety, her daily life. Sienna answered as honestly as she could without revealing specific details about Marco or his organization. By the end of the call, Marcus wasn't happy about the situation, but he understood why Sienna had made the choice she did. And more importantly, he knew she was alive, safe, and still his sister. The first few days in her new life passed in a strange blur of adjustment and learning. Sienna discovered that Sterling Financial Consulting was exactly what Marco had described. A legitimate firm handling complex financial analysis for wealthy clients who valued both expertise and discretion. Her new office was on the 25th floor of a building in Midtown, with views of the Manhattan skyline and security that was invisible but omnipresent. Her new colleagues were professional, welcoming, and either didn't know about her background or were too discreet to mention it. The work was challenging and engaging, using all of her forensic accounting skills but for corporate analysis rather than criminal prosecution. And the salary was indeed 3 times what the federal government had paid her, which felt almost obscene, but also satisfying after years of working for below-market rates in public service. Marco himself was often absent during the first week, managing his various business interests and giving Sienna space to adjust. But he checked in daily, usually via text message, asking if she needed anything, if she felt safe, if the living situation was acceptable. His messages were brief, professional, and respectful. Never intrusive, never demanding, just consistently present in a way that was reassuring rather than overwhelming. When he did come to the penthouse, usually in the evenings for dinner, Sienna found herself fascinated by him, despite all her better judgment. He was intelligent and well-read, capable of discussing everything from classical philosophy to modern economic theory with equal facility. He asked her questions about her work, her interests, her thoughts on various subjects, and he actually listened to her answers with genuine interest. "Tell me about your family," Marco said one evening as they sat on the penthouse terrace after dinner. It had become something of a routine over the past week. Isabella would prepare dinner, Marco and Sienna would eat together, and then they would move to the terrace to talk while the sun set over the city. "My parents died when I was 21, Sienna said. "Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light and hit them head-on. They died instantly. My brother Marcus was 14. I had just finished college and was planning to start graduate school. Instead, I became his legal guardian and gave up my graduate school plans to focus on raising him." "That is a heavy burden at 21, Marco observed. "It was," Sienna admitted, "but Marcus was my priority, making sure he had the stable home our parents would have wanted for him, making sure he could still pursue his dream of becoming a doctor. I worked 2 jobs for years, did freelance accounting work at night, lived in a tiny apartment. But Marcus got to go to a good high school, got into a great college, and now he's finishing medical school. He's going to be an incredible surgeon." "You sacrificed for him," Marco said quietly. "Gave up your own opportunities to ensure his success. That takes strength and love. Family is everything," Sienna said simply. "It is," Marco agreed with feeling. "My father died when I was 23. Heart attack, sudden and devastating. One day he was leading our family, making decisions, commanding respect throughout our world. The next day he was gone, and I was suddenly responsible for everything. The business, the organization, the hundreds of people who depended on our family for their livelihoods. My mother, my younger sister, all looking to me for leadership and protection. Is that why you took over? Sienna asked. The criminal organization? Marco looked out at the city lights before answering. I took over because it was my responsibility. Because my family has operated this way for 4 generations. Because walking away would have meant abandoning everyone who depended on us, betraying traditions and commitments that go back a century. But also because I wanted to do it better than it had been done before, to use our power more thoughtfully, to minimize harm, to maintain order through influence rather than violence whenever possible. You could have done something else, Sienna said. You're clearly intelligent enough for any legitimate career. I could have abandoned 400 people who depend on my family for their livelihoods, Marco replied. I could have walked away from neighborhoods that rely on us to maintain order that the police cannot or will not provide. I could have betrayed the memory of my father and 3 generations of Vitales who built what we have. Would that have been more honorable, Sienna? To choose personal legality at the expense of responsibility to my community and my family? Sienna didn't have a ready answer for that. Because when he framed it that way, his choices seemed less like criminal activity and more like complicated responsibility in a world that didn't fit neatly into categories of legal and illegal. You're making me think about things differently, she admitted. Good, Marco said, because you made me think differently too. Your testimony against Volkov, your willingness to stand up to a monster even knowing the personal cost. Your courage reminded me why I do what I do. Not for money or power, but to protect people from men like Volkov who operate without any moral boundaries at all. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights and processing the complicated relationship they were building. Sienna realized she was developing feelings for this man. Respect, certainly. Fascination, definitely. But also something deeper. Something that felt dangerously like attraction and genuine caring. 2 weeks into her new life under Marco's protection, everything changed again. Sienna was working late at Sterling Financial Consulting, finishing up an analysis of a complex merger, when her office phone rang. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, male, with a thick Russian accent. Miss Clark, you should not have testified against Viktor Volkov. You should not have thought you could hide behind Italian protection. You should not have assumed you were safe. Sienna felt ice run through her veins. Before she could respond, the call disconnected. Seconds later, Marco's security chief, a competent man named Antonio, was in her office. We monitored the call, Antonio said urgently. The building is locked down. We're taking you home immediately. Mr. Vitale is already on his way. The drive back to the penthouse was tense and fast. When Sienna arrived, Marco was already there, his expression darker than she had ever seen it. You're under my protection now, Marco said, the words carrying weight and anger. That means this threat against you is a threat against me. It means whoever made that call has just declared war on the Vitale family. And it means I am going to respond in a way that ensures no one ever questions my protection again. Marco, I don't want people to die because of me, Sienna said quietly. People will face consequences because they threaten someone under my protection, Marco corrected. This is not about you, Sienna. This is about maintaining the rules that keep our world stable. If I allow threats against those I protect to go unanswered, then my protection means nothing. Every enemy I have will see opportunity. Every rival will see weakness. I cannot allow that. Over the next 72 hours, Marco moved with decisive precision. Sienna didn't see most of what happened, but she heard reports from Isabella and saw the results. 3 members of what remained of Volkov's organization were found dead in different parts of the city. Each had been killed with professional efficiency. Each had been carrying information about Sienna, about her location, about plans to harm her as revenge for Volkov's conviction. They were hunting you, Marco explained when he finally returned to the penthouse 3 days after the threatening call. Building intelligence, planning an attack. They thought that because you were under Italian protection rather than in federal custody, you were vulnerable. I sent a clear message. Anyone who seeks to harm you will face the same fate. The threat is not eliminated completely, but it is significantly reduced. The survivors of Volkov's organization now understand that targeting you means certain death. You killed them, Sienna said, though it wasn't really a question. I protected you, Marco replied, which sometimes requires permanent solutions to permanent threats. I will not apologize for keeping you safe, Sienna. This is what my protection means. This is what I promised when I told you that you were under my care. I keep my promises. Sienna thought about the FBI's approach. Hide, hope, pray that you're never found. Contrast that with Marco's approach. Make it absolutely clear that finding her was irrelevant because harming her meant death. Both strategies had their logic, but only one of them had actually kept her safe when the threat emerged. Thank you, she said quietly. Marco's expression softened slightly. You do not thank me for doing what I promised to do. You simply trust that I will continue to do it. That night, something shifted between them. Maybe it was the reminder of the danger she faced. Maybe it was the absolute certainty of Marco's protection. Maybe it was simply the culmination of 2 weeks of growing connection. But when Marco prepared to leave the penthouse that evening, Sienna found herself asking him to stay. I don't want to be alone tonight, she admitted. After that phone call, after being reminded that there are still people out there who want to hurt me, I don't want to be alone. Marco studied her face for a long moment. Sienna, you need to understand something. If I stay tonight, if I comfort you, if I hold you while you process this fear, I am not a man who does anything halfway. I am not capable of casual comfort or temporary connections. If I stay, it means something. It means I am allowing myself to care for you in ways that go beyond my responsibility to protect you. And if I said I want that? Sienna asked quietly. If I said I've been developing feelings for you too, feelings that probably make no sense given who you are and who I am, but feelings that are real anyway, then I would say that I have been fighting the same feelings since the day you walked out of that FBI safe house and chose to trust me, Marco replied. But I would also say that you need to be certain, because once we cross this line, I cannot uncross it. You will not be just the woman I am protecting. You will be mine, and I protect what is mine with everything I have. That sounds possessive, Sienna said. It is, Marco admitted without apology. But it is also the truth of who I am. I do not know how to care for someone without complete commitment. If that frightens you, if that is too much, then I will leave now, and we will maintain appropriate boundaries. But if you are willing to accept what I am offering, if you are ready for what being mine means, then I will stay, and everything changes. Sienna thought about her life before Marco. The loneliness of being so independent that she had forgotten how to let anyone close. The years of focusing on work and taking care of Marcus to the exclusion of her own emotional needs. The isolation that had become so normal she had stopped noticing it. Stay, she said. I want you to stay. Marco crossed the room and pulled her into his arms with a tenderness that contrasted sharply with his dangerous reputation. When he kissed her, it was with a passion that had clearly been building for weeks, restrained by his own discipline but now finally released with her permission. You're under my protection now, Marco whispered against her lips, but you're also mine. Do you understand the difference? I understand, Sienna breathed, and I accept both. That night marked the beginning of a relationship that defied every expectation and broke every rule Sienna had thought she understood about her own life. Over the next several months, she discovered what it meant to be with Marco Vitale. It meant dinners at exclusive restaurants where everyone deferred to him with respect that bordered on reverence. It meant meeting members of his organization who treated her with the same respect they showed Marco because she was clearly important to him. It meant learning about the complex web of businesses and operations he managed, some legitimate and some not, all carefully balanced to maintain power and order. But it also meant quiet mornings drinking coffee on the terrace while they read the newspaper together. It meant Marco attending Marcus's presentations at the hospital and asking intelligent questions about surgical procedures with genuine interest. It meant conversations that ranged from philosophy to economics to the fundamental questions of morality and power. It meant being seen completely, understood deeply, and valued absolutely by someone who had no reason to pretend or dissemble because he was already exactly who he chose to be. You still struggle with what I do, Marco observed one evening, several months into their relationship as they lay together in bed, Sienna's head resting on his chest while his fingers traced absent patterns on her shoulder. Sometimes, Sienna admitted, not because I judge you, but because I spent so many years believing that everything could be divided into legal and illegal, right and wrong, good and bad. You've shown me that reality is more complicated than that. That good people sometimes operate outside the law, that bad people sometimes hide behind it. That morality is about how you treat people and what principles guide your choices, not just whether those choices fit into legal frameworks. And does that trouble you? The complexity? It challenges me, Sienna said. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe seeing the world in shades of gray instead of black and white makes me better at my job, better at understanding people and motivations and the complicated choices we all make. Marco kissed the top of her head. You make me want to be better too, to use my power more thoughtfully, to remember that strength is not just about control, but about protecting people who cannot protect themselves. You remind me every day that there is goodness in the world worth preserving. The threat from Volkov's organization continued to diminish over time. Between Marco's decisive response and the gradual dismantling of what remained of Volkov's network by both law enforcement and rival criminal organizations, the danger to Sienna decreased significantly. But Marco maintained her protection anyway, more out of principle than necessity at this point. I could probably go back to a more normal life, Sienna mentioned one evening, about 6 months after she had first accepted Marco's protection. Get my own apartment again. Resume something closer to what I had before. Marco's expression became carefully neutral, though Sienna could see the emotion beneath it. Is that what you want? No, Sienna said immediately and honestly. But I wanted to make sure you understood that I'm choosing to stay, not because I need protection anymore. Not because I'm dependent on you, but because I want to be here, with you. Because this has become my life by choice, not just by circumstance. The relief on Marco's face was evident. He pulled her close, holding her with the fierce protectiveness that had become so familiar. I have become accustomed to you being here, to coming home and finding you reading on the terrace, to sharing dinner and conversation, to falling asleep beside you and waking with you still there. I would miss all of that if you left. I would miss you, Sienna, more than I can adequately express. Then I won't leave, Sienna said simply. Unless you want me to. Never, Marco replied with intensity. I want you here, Bella. Always. 8 months after Sienna had first accepted Marco's protection, Agent Jennifer Martinez requested a meeting. She wanted to confirm that Sienna was safe, that she was there voluntarily, that she hadn't been coerced or threatened into staying under Marco's control. They met at a cafe in the West Village, a neutral location where they could talk without concern about surveillance from either the FBI or Marco's organization. Martinez studied Sienna carefully as they sat down, looking for signs of distress or fear. You look good, Martinez said finally, and the surprise in her voice was evident. Healthy, happy even. That's not what I expected to find. I am happy, Sienna confirmed. Safer than I ever would have been in witness protection. Living a life that's actually mine instead of a manufactured identity. Marco Vitale is a dangerous man, Sienna, head of one of the most powerful crime families in New York. We've been trying to build cases against him for years, and we've never been able to make anything stick because he's too careful, too smart, too well protected. And unlike Viktor Volkov, Marco is not a monster, Sienna said firmly. He doesn't traffic human beings. He doesn't brutalize innocents. He doesn't operate through random violence and terror. He provides services to communities that the government has failed. He maintains order through influence and negotiation rather than indiscriminate brutality. He has rules, honor, and boundaries. You're defending him. I'm being honest about who he is, Sienna replied. Which is more than the FBI was when you told me my only option was to disappear forever. Marco gave me back my life, Agent Martinez. He let me keep my identity, my career, my relationship with my brother. He's kept me safer than your program ever could have, and he's treated me with more respect and genuine care than I've experienced from anyone else. Martinez was quiet for a moment, processing this. Are you in a relationship with him, romantically? Yes, Sienna said without hesitation. And before you ask, it's voluntary, genuine, and the best thing that's happened to me in years. He's intelligent, honorable, and absolutely committed to me. I love him. He loves me. It's real. This is not what I expected when I came here today, Martinez admitted. What did you expect? To find me terrified and trapped? I'm neither. I'm protected, valued, and loved by someone who has proven over and over that he keeps his promises. Can you honestly say the FBI would have done better? Martinez couldn't, and they both knew it. She left with assurances that as long as Sienna confirmed she was there voluntarily, the FBI would close its investigation into her current status. But she also left her business card with a final piece of advice. If you ever need help, if anything changes, if you ever want out, call me. No judgment, no questions, just help. I won't need it, Sienna said confidently, but thank you. That night, Sienna told Marco about the meeting. He listened carefully, his expression unreadable until she finished. Do you have doubts? Marco asked seriously. About us? About this life? About the choices you've made? No, Sienna said without hesitation. I know what you are, Marco. I know what you do. I know the world you operate in. And I've chosen to be here anyway, because you've shown me more honor, more loyalty, and more genuine care than anyone else ever has. You gave me back my life when the FBI wanted to erase it. You protected me without making me feel like a prisoner. You've respected my independence while offering genuine partnership. How could I possibly have doubts about that? Marco pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that still took her breath away even after months together. I love you, Sienna Clark. That is not something I say easily or often, but you have become essential to me in ways I did not think possible. You challenge me, inspire me, make me want to be worthy of the faith you have placed in me. I love you too, Sienna whispered, even though falling in love with a mafia boss was definitely not part of any plan I ever made. The best things rarely are, Marco said with a smile. 1 year after Sienna had first accepted Marco's protection, he took her to dinner at a small family-owned Italian restaurant in Brooklyn. It was quiet, intimate, and filled with the kind of authentic atmosphere that couldn't be manufactured or bought. This was my father's favorite place, Marco explained as they were shown to a corner booth. He brought my mother here on their first date. He brought me here when I was 7 years old and told me about responsibility, honor, and what it meant to be part of our family. This place holds more memories for me than anywhere else in the city. Every important moment in my life has somehow connected back to this restaurant. It's beautiful, Sienna said, and she meant it. The restaurant had warmth and character that spoke of generations of family tradition. After dinner, as they lingered over coffee and dessert, Marco reached across the table and took her hand. His expression was more serious than she had seen in months. Sienna, this past year has been the best year of my life. You challenged everything I thought I knew about relationships, about trust, about what it means to share my life with someone who sees all of me and chooses to stay anyway. You brought light into spaces I didn't even realize were dark. You made me want to be better, do better, use my power more thoughtfully and my influence more carefully. Marco, let me finish, he said gently. You came into my life as someone I was protecting. You have become my partner, my confidant, my best friend, and the love of my life. You have shown me that strength comes in many forms, that honor is about how you treat people rather than what rules you follow, and that the best relationships are built on genuine understanding and mutual respect. He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a stunning ring, a vintage diamond set in platinum, surrounded by smaller stones in an intricate Art Deco pattern that was both elegant and timeless. This ring belonged to my grandmother, Marco said. She was the strongest woman I ever knew before I met you. She loved fiercely, protected her family absolutely, and never compromised her values even when life made it difficult. My grandfather gave her this ring when he asked her to spend her life with him, to build a family together, to face whatever challenges came with partnership and courage. He took the ring from the box and held it up so it caught the candlelight. Sienna Clark, will you marry me? Will you spend your life with me? Build a family with me? Face whatever comes with the knowledge that we face it together? Will you continue to be mine, as I am yours, for as long as we both live? Sienna felt tears start to slip down her cheeks. A year ago, she had been preparing to testify against a brutal criminal, expecting her life to end in either death or the erasure of witness protection. Instead, she had found protection, partnership, genuine love, and a future that was richer than anything she had imagined possible. Yes, she said. Yes to all of it. To spending my life with you. To building a family together. To being yours as you are mine. Yes, Marco. Absolutely yes. Marco slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her with a tenderness that still made her heart race. Around them, the restaurant erupted in applause. Sienna realized that the other diners were all people connected to Marco's family, people who had been waiting to celebrate this moment with them. "You planned this?" she said with a laugh through her tears. "I have been planning this for months," Marco admitted, waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect place. And tonight felt right. Here, where my family's history lives, where my father made his own promises to my mother, where our future together officially begins. The wedding took place 3 months later. It was a beautiful ceremony that blended Sienna's preferences with Marco's family traditions. Marcus served as one of the witnesses, having gradually come to not just accept, but genuinely appreciate Marco's devotion to his sister. Isabella cried through the entire ceremony, and Sienna wore a dress that made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. "You're under my protection now," Marco said as they danced at their reception, echoing the words he had first spoken in that FBI safe house over a year ago. But those words mean something different now. "You're not just protected. You're my wife, my partner, my equal in all things that matter. You're my heart." "And you're mine," Sienna replied. "My protector, my partner, my love. Everything I didn't know I needed until you walked into my life and changed it completely." 2 years after the wedding, Sienna stood in the nursery of their penthouse, holding their 6-month-old daughter Sophia, while Marco looked on with an expression of wonder that appeared every time he watched them together. "She has your eyes," Marco said softly, "and your determination. Already she knows exactly what she wants and will not be deterred from getting it. She will be formidable." "She also has your stubborn streak," Sienna countered with a laugh. "And your ability to command a room despite being barely 2 feet tall." "She will be magnificent," Marco predicted. "Strong like her mother, principled like her mother, brave like her mother, and protected like her father, honorable like her father, and loved beyond measure like her father," Sienna added. They had built a life together that worked despite its unconventional origins. Sienna continued her work in forensic accounting, now consulting for both legitimate businesses, and occasionally for Marco's organization when complex financial issues arose. Marcus had finished his medical residency and frequently joined them for family dinners. Isabella had fully adopted her role as grandmother to Sophia, spoiling her outrageously while teaching her Italian lullabies. And Marco had continued to evolve as a leader, using Sienna's analytical approach to find solutions that minimized violence and maximized benefit for all parties involved. He had become known as someone who preferred negotiation to conflict, strategy to force, and long-term stability to short-term gains. "Do you ever regret it?" Marco asked one evening as they sat on their terrace, Sophia sleeping peacefully in her bassinet beside them. "The choice you made that morning when you walked out of the FBI safe house and accepted my protection?" "Never," Sienna said without hesitation. "That choice gave me everything I have now. You. Our daughter. A life that's richer and more fulfilling than anything I could have had if I'd disappeared into witness protection. You told me then that I was under your protection, but what you actually gave me was freedom. The freedom to be myself, to live my life, to love openly. That's what your protection really meant. You protect me too," Marco said quietly. "You protect my heart, my soul, my humanity. You remind me every day that there is goodness in the world worth preserving. That strength is not just about power, but about using that power to protect and nurture what matters most." Sienna leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence and the absolute certainty of his devotion. "We protect each other. That's what partnership means. That's what love means. That's what we've built together." As the city lights sparkled below them and their daughter slept peacefully beside them, Sienna thought about the courtroom where this had all begun. Where she had testified against a monster, been marked for revenge, and caught the attention of a man who had changed her entire destiny. Where Marco Vitale had looked at her and made a decision that had altered both their lives forever. "You're under my protection now." Those had been his words, a declaration that had sounded like a claim, like possession, like something to fear. But what it had actually been was a promise, a commitment, an offer of partnership disguised as protection. The beginning of a love story that proved sometimes the most unexpected protection leads to the most extraordinary life. That's the story of Sienna Clark, the forensic accountant who testified against a brutal criminal and ended up under the protection of a Mafia boss who became her husband and the father of her child. Her story proves that courage can be rewarded in unexpected ways, that protection can transform into genuine partnership, and that sometimes the most dangerous choice is actually the safest one when made with the right person. Sienna and Marco's love story reminds us that honor exists in unexpected places, that real protection comes from genuine care rather than just power, and that the best relationships are built on mutual respect, honest communication, and the willingness to see beyond surface differences to the heart underneath. Their relationship shows us that love can grow from the most unlikely circumstances. That partnership means protecting each other in all the ways that matter, and that sometimes the person who declares you under their protection is actually giving you the freedom to be exactly who you are meant to be. If this incredible story moved you, and you want to hear more amazing tales of unexpected protection, dangerous romance, and love that transforms everything, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We share new stories every week about real people who discovered that true love often comes from the most unlikely places, and that the best relationships are built on choosing each other despite, or perhaps because of, all the complications. What did you think of Sienna and Marco's story? Would you have accepted protection from a mafia boss? Have you ever had to choose between safety and freedom, only to discover they weren't mutually exclusive? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing how these stories resonate with your own experiences of unexpected connections, brave choices, and love that changes everything. Remember, sometimes the most protective love comes from the most unexpected source. Sometimes the person who claims you is actually setting you free. And sometimes a declaration that sounds like possession is actually the beginning of the most genuine partnership you'll ever know. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.